Now, before we get into the specifics of today's agenda, I'd like to take some time to recognize two great regional leaders. The first is Congressman Jerry Conley and the former Fairfax County Supervisor Kathy Hudgens. We lost both of them in the last month. Jerry Conley served as a member of the U.S. Congress representing Virginia's 11th District for 16 years and as a ranking member of the House of Representatives Oversight Committee. Prior to his role as a representative, he served on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors from 1995 to 2008. And during that time, he also served on the COG board and also served as the COG board chair. Congressman Conley was a champion of regionalism. His legacy includes advancing projects like the Metro Silver Line, transforming Tysons into a vibrant transit-oriented community, and helping lead COG's efforts to create a water supply and drought plan for the region. We will miss his leadership as an extraordinary public servant. And on a personal note, I'll just make a couple of comments. I had the pleasure of working for Jerry when he was first elected as a member of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. He hired me to serve as his land use and zoning aide, and I just got a unique opportunity to see his commitment to public service and to see his ability to not only articulate a vision and ideas, but actually to implement them, to get things done. And I thank him for all of the lessons that he helped me personally with, but then thinking about the loss for this community. He was just an amazing person in so many ways, gave of his time, his energy, and his talents to serve this region. So I just wanted to make that personal note. Second, for Kathy Hudgens served as the Fairfax County Hunter Mill District Supervisor from 1999 to 2019. She supported the county's efforts around affordable housing and transportation growth. During this time, she also served on the Transportation Planning Board and chaired both the TPB and the Access for All Advisory Committee. Kathy was a member of the Metro Board for 11 years, serving as board chair from 2011 to 2012. Both Conley and Hudgens were recipients of the COG Elizabeth and David Skoll Metropolitan Public Service Award, our highest honor here at COG. And with that, I would like to invite Supervisor Walkinshaw from Fairfax County to share any reflections he has as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for honoring these two incredible leaders. I've had a number of opportunities over the last few weeks to talk about Jerry Conley and his legacy, and this is a very appropriate place to do it because he loved COG, was very proud of the work that he and those he served with at COG did on behalf of our region. And the word I've used a number of times to describe his impact in Fairfax and on our region and even on larger stages is singular. He really is a singular figure in Fairfax County in terms of leadership and impact. You can go anywhere in Fairfax and see the very tangible impact that he had. From the Oakton Library that he secured from a developer when he was the Providence District Supervisor to the Mosaic District, which is now thriving, to, of course, the Silver Line, which was a project he battled for from the day he was sworn into the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors in 1995 until the project was completed. So incredible impacts. He, I think, will be the only person in history to ever serve as the two-time president of the Fairfax County Federation of Citizens Associations and the two-time president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, because he was very committed to starting at the local grassroots level, building to the regional level, and he took that approach all the way to the world stage, advocating on our behalf. All of us in the region owe him an incredible debt for the work that he has done. He was a very committed COG board member. Many, many times he would tell me about the importance of regionalism and the importance of the work that COG did. He was instrumental here at COG after 9/11 and the development of the emergency preparedness plan and response work that has served us so well for the last 25 almost years. Flood drought response plan and flood prevention planning. He was just very committed to the nuts and bolts of the regional work that we do here at COG, and had tremendous respect for each and every one of you who serve your jurisdictions at the local and state government levels. He felt very strongly that local government was actually the highest form of government, and was passionate about that throughout his time even serving us in Congress. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for setting aside some time today to honor him and Supervisor Hudgens, and thank all of you who have reached out to his office or his family in the last several weeks to express your condolences on the loss. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Walkinshaw. So at this time, I think I'm going to just advance through our agenda. I see that Senator Warner has just joined us. So let me take a couple minutes here and say it's a great honor to have you.
Don't do the
here.
introduction. Skip the introduction.
Okay. That's the prerogative of the speaker. So with that, I will welcome Senator Warner. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
for being
Rodney.
here.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody. It's good to see friends around the table, and it's good to see our colleagues from the district in Maryland as well. I appreciate you bumping me up a little bit. Strangely enough, where I work, I don't get to set my own schedule, and votes and things are happening. So what I'd like to do is give you, 5 minutes of kind of the holy heck moments, and then, take a couple questions. I've got to be out of here by about 12:25. So again, my thanks and a real appreciation for what you guys all do. It's tough at every level at this point, as we all know. Probably the only jobs harder than you guys and harder than mine at this point is if you're a school board member. But it is a huge, huge challenge. We're looking at the we haven't decided whether it's big awful bill, big, gross bill. I think it's just a plain damn cruel bill. I think many of your jurisdictions, the national numbers are 16 million cut off of healthcare. We focused a lot on the Medicaid cuts. What we've not educated people enough on, and that's our responsibility, but we can get you all information, is on the effects on the marketplace, because the premium support is going to be radically cut back. And on average, if you're an $80,000 your senior family of two of seniors, you're going to see your healthcare costs, if you buy it on the marketplace, go up $11,000 on an annual basis. And every family of kind of middle-class families who are buying out of the marketplace are going to get whacked at a level that I think most folks don't fully appreciate, and we need to do more getting that information out. In Virginia, that number is about 303,000. The other piece that has been received some attention and it's getting a lot of traction as well is the cut to food assistance. We are going to see, again, speaking on the Virginia side, but we can extrapolate for the region, about 204,000 folks. And Mark, one of the things that's not gotten a lot of attention, even with those cuts, there's going to be about a $300 million shift of responsibility to the state budget. And it will be, slightly smaller, obviously, for Maryland and DC. But it is horrific. And, and one of the things that why I, even with my friends in the press here, I'm happy to call this the cruel bill. When you add all this and then you also still cut assistance to food banks, we're not going to get rid of our $37 trillion debt by, nickel and diamond on food banks, but that's what this legislation does as well. So the more we can focus on this legislation, I think in its awfulness, the better. Many of the things that are happening around the country right now, I believe, are as much the president trying to distract the public. But it's out there. One of the other items I was just looking is that, again, it's gotten almost zero information, is the earned income tax credit is going to be made much more complicated to be able to access. And a heck of a lot of folks in the DMV who have to grapple with that. So bucket number one. Bucket number two, on the federal workforce, I will take a wager, and I'm trying to get some of my Republican colleagues to actually shake hands and take this bet, that the whole DOGE effort, when fully audited and accounted for, will cost the taxpayer money. We're still trying to get, and you guys can help on this, we're still trying to get the right numbers of how many folks in the DMV have lost their jobs. I mean, I've seen a recent number, I think on the Virginia side alone, of about 168,000. That's both government workers and contractors. Do not take that word as gospel for friends in the press. I've just heard that, and if anybody's got a better number, but I think we ought to do a better job of trying to document that. And one of the things, I was meeting with the chairman of the Fed yesterday, and this is not a COG issue necessarily, but talk to us as somebody who's been around data collection stuff for a while. The fact that we are starting to undermine our data collection abilities on things like inflation and others, I mean, that's always been one of America's strongest notions, that we don't cook the books. But if we can't collect inflation data and other labor statistics data, again, that will allow more challenges. I could spend my whole time, and it's not a COG issue, but it is something I am hugely concerned about, which is the politicization of our intelligence products. We saw this years ago. It led us into war with Iraq, and we are actively seeing that right now as intelligence professionals are being fired if they don't bend the knee and change product. That should concern us. We are on both sides of the river, the heart and soul of the intelligence community, and our intelligence professionals are under huge stress, as obviously all of our DoD folks are as well. Then an item that may not have gotten much attention, as we try to recover from the tragedy at National, and we got legislation to try to do this, but buried in, I believe, the big bill or somewhere else, is an effort by Senator Cruz to have a renegotiation of the 100-year leases that were just signed with National and Dulles last August. This would add enormous additional costs back. It would really hit MWA in a dramatic way. And, it seems to be more based in spite than in policy. Host of other items. Why don't I stop there? Open season. And I should have asked him, a little smarter clerk before I came in. Are these wonderful folks from which part of the press are they? Or they're just for local reporting?
Yeah, open press and local
Okay.
press. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Part of the fake media I love. Questions, comments, suggestions, criticisms?
Okay, so thank you very much for that background, and thank you for all the work you're doing to support our region. Thank you for fighting for us, because we need that protection, unfortunately, because of the impacts that are coming down the pike as it relates to the cuts you mentioned, obviously at the agency department level, but then at the contractor, and then at the tail on the contractor base. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that will be lost in all of our communities if we're not able to defend against this. So I guess the question I'll start with is, how can our organization, how can COG help you in protecting our region against this threat, which is unprecedented and also unexpected by the current administration?
Yeah, I think, one, the DMV delegation is obviously united. You don't have problems there. But I would strongly urge many of the programs that are being cut in this cruel, ugly bill are regions that disproportionately voted for President Trump. As local government officials, I would strongly urge, and our friends from the General Assembly, whether it's in Maryland or in Virginia, that you contact Republican local elected officials that you know around the state. This bill, if it gets its way through the Senate, which hopefully the more information we get out becomes more challenging, it will still have to go back to the House. And many of the House members said, well, I didn't really know we were going to cut Medicaid that bad. Well, I didn't know we were, going to shut down rural hospitals. And the two services in rural communities are going to get hit, are OBGYN and mental health at huge levels. Many of those members are going to have another chance to now be informed and have another chance to vote. So we have to reach out to our Republican friends. One thing I didn't mention on the litany that I should have, and particularly for our DC friends, is we are still putting as much pressure as we can on the House to go ahead and do what the Senate did and restore the $1 billion of your tax money back in. But I think, Rodney, the most important thing we can do is you don't need to give us attaboys. We need to kind of go out and convince folks who supported President Trump, who said, I support him because I thought we were going to get lower grocery prices and a secure border. Right. I didn't think we were going to see the largest number of people thrown off healthcare in modern American history. And all frankly, and those of you on the Virginia side know I'm a pro-business, pro-capitalist. Right. But it just ain't fair when you have in this bill the equivalent of what will, for everybody at minimum wage in this country, we'll see a 53% tax increase, no matter what but that's at minimum wage. And that the top will see about a minimum of a $400,000 tax cut. So the plain unfairness, I mean, I got nothing wrong with people being successful, but I think they ought to pay their fair share. Yes. The just basic unfairness on the math. And then, for members who are concerned, as I am candidly, about the debt, my first gang up here was the Simpson-Bowles plan, where we were trying to cut $4 trillion off of the debt because we thought, oh my God, if we get to 17, we're screwed, we're up the creek. We're now at 36 or 37, and this monstrosity adds between 2.5 and $3 billion to the national debt.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Senator Warner, how much time do you have?
I've got a couple more questions if you'd like, but I'm also, I'm happy to be, Okay,
well, I want to be mindful of your time. So I've got two questions around me. So first I'll recognize Vice Chair Collins, and then I'll recognize Vice Chair Allen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you like that?
Good afternoon. It's no secret that in Trump 1.0, there were efforts to gut the federal workforce, particularly in the Washington region. And so my question is essentially, what can Congress do to address this onslaught? Mm-hmm. Because what you referenced earlier, I think is pretty clear, because many of my residents are making me aware that when they were originally RIF'd, and now they're receiving information that they can come back to work. So I'm just curious to hear, from your perspective.
Well, a couple of them, and the confusion that gives, or one of the things that I find is a very powerful point. We've got obviously lots of veterans in the region. We spent, and this is an example of how the federal government ought to not operate, but we spent 10 years building new healthcare facilities in Spotsylvania County and then down in Chesapeake and Hampton Roads. We've got these brand new facilities that are only about a third filled, because who in their right mind is going to want to go work for the VA if they're still talking about cutting 80,000 plus employees? So I generally thought, Vice Chair Collins, that I've been hugely disappointed that my Republican friends haven't been willing to raise their voice on some of the national security abuses. The next area, and this goes to your question, is if you take away the power of the appropriators, and you can have these rescission bills come up, which basically takes that whole appropriations power away, We thought that because appropriators have always viewed themselves as kind of a third party on the Hill, Democrats, Republicans, and appropriators. But if they give up without a fight, it's a huge issue, and that is about to play out. And we are, for our friends on the Virginia side, and frankly for the whole region, we are seeing, and I'm not sure they're public yet, but there are certain things that we're going to try to do with the FBI that would dramatically hit Northern Virginia, and as they try to move some of those facilities out, and we'll need to call upon you on that. But I think on the front end, Congress can use its constitutional authority and say no when we appropriate dollars. You've got to follow the law. And then secondly, as we saw from the effort to move in Trump 1, what was it, a part of the ag department out, I think, to Kansas, and it ended up, at a cost level and frankly, a decrease in quality that was pretty substantial. Making that business case that this is not going to save money to some of my fiscal conservative so-called Republicans is one thing we can do as well. Thank you for the question.
Okay, and now Vice Chair Allen.
Thank you. And Senator Warner, thank you very much. You're on the right side of pretty much everything you said today, so we appreciate it. I want to start with a thank you.
Pretty much. What was the one like? Oh, I'm that Virginia guy. I forgot.
Yeah, we'll claim you in DC. And that gets to my first thank you, which is we really do appreciate your leadership as part of the whole regional caucus of trying to right this wrong in the House with the budget. I know all my colleagues understand it really well. $1 billion of our local tax dollars locked away after we've gone through a budget. It hurts our city, and we all know as a region, what's good for DC is good for Virginia, it's good for Maryland, and vice versa. So as a region, it hurts all of us. So I really appreciate you being a vocal leader on that. Which gets to the question, obviously, that the House just says they just don't have time to fix it. And they just haven't been able to find the time, but they did find time this week to try to overturn and repeal several of DC's laws that have been on the books for a couple of years. They're headed to the Senate, so we hope that we can count on your continued support to fight back on that. One of them in particular has to do with something every police chief has asked for in our city that we finally got done with for them. And that is the ability to not have to hire back. Police officers have been found guilty of gross misconduct, of violence, officers that were guilty of sexual violence, physical violence, and the chief was forced to hire them back. And those are the officers chiefs want to say, that's not who I want on my force. I know it's going to get the trappings of public safety and try to get into the politics of public safety when it comes to the Senate, but asking for your help to make sure we push back on that. The other, of course, is our just local voting rights that they seem determined to undermine as well. So I certainly give you a chance if you want to address those two, but we certainly ask for your continued support.
As any of this, I got to do my own due diligence, but I think my record is pretty clear on recognizing and respecting the authority of the district. There was one time when we all kind of went a little different direction. I'll acknowledge that as well. But so I want to do my own due diligence. But yes, I hear you on that. I hear you.
We appreciate it, and obviously we are oftentimes with both hands behind our back in these fights. So we appreciate the support from the region, the delegation. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll take one last quickie.
Yeah, one last question from Supervisor. Okay, sorry, Delegate Kruzak. I mean, Sickles.
Whatever his name is, didn't hold it. Rodney, who is your delegate? It's not Mark Sickles, is it?
It's both of them. I have Kruzak and Sickles.
Thank you. This is more of a comment, but we are kind of preparing the region for a local tax increase of some kind to support a metro over the long term. We want to solve this problem for the way into the future. And so just want to thank you in advance for anything you do to keep our capital money in the budget, the PREA money, and anything else you can do for transit that we can benefit from nationwide. So that's just a comment. And also, one of the kind of depressing things about what's going on now, in addition to all the other stuff is that Virginia has the lowest uninsured rate we've ever had. It's a historic low. Partly because we took over the benefit exchange ourselves from healthcare.gov. That's been really successful. Our expansion's been successful. And when people get off Medicaid, commercial insurance is going to go up. And that's what I don't understand why Republicans don't understand that there's no free lunch in healthcare. Those folks are just going to be paid for with charity care, uncompensated care, and everybody's commercial insurance is going to go up to pay for that, so.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that's where I think that the thing that we've got to do, and I'd ask your help on this too, is not just make this about Medicaid. It is the small business, the individual who buys in the marketplace. And frankly, even you're saying, well, I don't buy in the marketplace, I don't have Medicaid. You're still going to go up as you take out 16 million Americans out of the healthcare system. They're still going to show up in uncompensated care, and that's going to drive up the costs. So amen, amen, amen. Let me again thank Clark and everybody from COG for doing this. We are stronger as a region. We all know that. We've got still some challenges on how we continue to market ourselves as a region. I think that I'd love to come back and talk about some ideas I've got there going forward. I still also think there's more we can do around innovation, and particularly as more and more entities think about the intersection between technology and defense, and in my domain, the intelligence community. I think there's some great economic development opportunities that I'd love to discuss that the region could be a big win on. But, speaking for all four of at least the senators from the DMV, we got your back. We're your partners. We will get through this.
So
Thank you.
thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time. Thank you for taking time to answer questions, and we look forward to the continued partnership. And good luck.
And later, if you want to go ahead and give your colleagues that glowing introduction of me, I'd be happy to have it.
Okay, we will resume the agenda items for today. So we'll go back to agenda item number 3. Would like to ask if there are any amendments to today's agenda. Any amendments to today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 4 and 5. This will be the executive director's report, which will be followed by the FY 2026 work program and budget. And I'll ask the executive director, Clark Mercer, for his report, and then we'll have a discussion on the proposed FY 2026 work plan and budget, and then we will be voting on it today. He will be joined by Julie Mussag, who is our Chief Financial Officer here at COG. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mercer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I won't trespass on too much of your time. We've got a great rest of the agenda, and that was a terrific update from Senator Warner. I will start on that note. We brief every member of our CODEL, particularly our new members, with kind of a COG 101, who we are, what we do. So in the last week, briefed Congresswoman Delaney, Congressman Subramanian, and Congressman Vindman. And it was a good reminder that we still need to do a good job of just explaining what we do. Almost uniformly, the response was, kind of vaguely, we're aware, had no idea you did that much. We should be reminding some of our electeds and stakeholders to move in your direction for transportation, public safety, clean air, clean water. So we will keep doing that. Also, while terrific having Senator Warner here today, we invite every member of the CODEL, as we have done the last few meetings, to attend and address the members. So if you have and I know you do, a particularly close relationship with your member of Congress, please encourage your member to participate and attend. Grateful that Senator Warner came today. A number of us took the red eye last night home from Seattle. Our national conference of regional councils was out in the Seattle region. Julie attended, met with her counterparts, CFOs and CAOs, Hillary Chapman. There was a housing work group, Monica and Steve as well. So that was a terrific couple of days to kind of meet and be rejuvenated through our regional council. They are headquartered directly across the street, and we are doing more with our partners moving forward. I will flag, Mayor Sidner asked about an AI policy and what we thought about AI policies for local jurisdictions. Our September meeting will be almost entirely AI themed and focused. We will have a series of events throughout the day talking about AI's use at local government, what private sector's doing, what are some policies and thoughts that folks have. We're partnering with NACO, National Association of Counties. Their executive director and Brian Hill, who's here from Fairfax County, have been very involved in this space. And we will have some samples at that time for folks to consider as you talk and work with your own staffs on AI policy. That'll be the September meeting. You're aware in August, we have the August off, and next month is our retreat. We will send out the agenda very shortly, but a quick preview. We will have a kind of an emergency ops overview from a senior director at the McChrystal Group, who was the emergency manager in Virginia Beach when they had a very notable active shooter incident. We'll walk through that whole incident, the role that staff, elected officials played. That's in response to members here encouraging us to do more in those emergency response table type review type events. We'll do a deep dive on transit and get a good DMV Moves update for everybody here. And we'll also, you've met the facilitator for our mission statement and strategic plan. We'll do a little bit deeper dive on that as well at the retreat. A shout out to Conti and the Transportation Planning Board this last month. They approved $760,000 in grants for 9 local projects through the Transportation Land Use Connections and Regional Roadway Safety Program. Lastly, we will hear from our public safety team today. We are debuting a nearly real-time crime dashboard, which has been a lot of work. That team has been doing a lot recently. The mutual aid agreement seems to be in effect 24/7. We've had World Pride here. We've got a large parade this weekend that necessitates regional cooperation. And our next collaboration and action video, which will be out soon, is about public safety. We talked with 3 fire chiefs from around the region, as well as our U.S. Capitol Police Chief about the work we do regionally in public safety. Now I will move into our budget for the year. Julie is here to take over this presentation. I will say there's a few federal grants that we've received, which are kind of the thrust of our increase year-over-year cost, the most notable being our housing work and a grant that we received from HUD. I think you all are very familiar with our work product, so I'm going to hand it over to Julie to dive into the numbers now.
You. Sorry, thank you. If you go to slide 3, just want to start off with, there were a number of challenges to this year's budget. As you know, federal funding is sort of on everybody's top of mind, but I do want to make sure the board is fully aware of no known cuts at this time to any of our program funds. There are a lot of changes to existing terms and conditions, compliance questions, things like that, but I think we've done a really good job of keeping up with all of that, being in compliance, checking in with our funders, and getting back in writing that they are comfortable with our current policies, procedures, and we can proceed. So while we have had a lot of time dedicated to increased reporting and scrutiny, we are so far in a very good position. Part of that, this year we had a real deep dive from FTA, who's our cognizant agency for our indirect costs. I'm guessing it was a sign of the times at how long this particular audit was lasting and some of the detail that we went into. We did finally get to a good place with them. Now, there's a change in the methodology. However, in the end, it doesn't really affect COG significantly overall, but I just want to make sure the board is aware that the indirect rates right now in the budget you'll be approving are not the approved rates from the FTA because we don't have them yet. I've been told within a week we should have them. I hope it's just before July 1. But there will be some changes and variances going forward when I report back on actual. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. And that there were some expenses that were disallowed, which will put a little pressure on member dues going into next year, but nothing I don't think we cannot handle and find some savings elsewhere to fund that. And then I think some good news on our other challenge, which is the refinancing of the building. We are, I think, nearing the end on that, and we have light at the end of the tunnel in a very positive manner. So look forward to hopefully at the board retreat getting into that. But like I said, there were just a few extra special challenges this year, which kept me on my toes. I didn't want to get bored after 5 years of this. All right, so on the next slide, this gives you the high-level revenue summary showing operating, subrecipient, and special revenue. Overall, we're seeing a $4.5 million increase in revenue versus the FY25 budget, and our operating capital reserves are fully funded at policy level in the budget we are presenting. So on the next slide, this gives you a more detailed look at the operating revenue and expenditures. The complete work program is included in your work packet. It's about a 60 to 70 page document, so there's a lot more detail in there. But this slide gives you the overall revenue and expenditure snapshot for FY26 compared to 25 budget and 24 actual. So compared to 2025 budget revenue, the 2026 work program estimates a $7.9 million increase in operating revenue, which is about 15.6%. This is primarily in federal and state revenue, and it's due to the increase in funding available from the new HUD grant and a reclass from pass-through to operating for securing the city funds. So that is not really an increase in revenue overall, which is why you see it's only 4.5 in total, but a lot of it was just a reclass of revenue based on some additional work around deciding what, through our very technical audit definitions of what's operating versus subrecipient. So the revenue is driven by state and federal, and this is partially offset by other revenue due to the completion of 2 climate projects. One was for the Department of Defense related to resiliency on military bases, and the other was the Amtrak Repower Project. So those just wrapped up and are no longer part of our revenue. So slide 6 outlines the revenue by program area. And as in the past, the percentages are pretty much the same as prior years and in line with that. Obviously, transportation planning and operations is 60% of COG's revenue and continues to be the most significant, followed by Homeland Security and Public Safety. All right, the next 2 slides are for you, COG.
Sure. We cover a lot of ground as staff, and I think do a lot with the number of staff and the money that we have coming to us. But some highlights for this year, if I were to highlight a handful of programs or new initiatives. Obviously, DMV Moves has been a big lift with staff here, some contract support, the survey work that we did with the region. That will be wrapping this fall. When I say wrapping, I think a number of the recommendations, if they can't be implemented this fall, you will see a recommendation for where that work might live moving forward, so that the goal here is not just to make recommendations about how to improve transit, but to actually implement those recommendations, or yet we will end up being yet another report on Metro and transit. So working with our partners, regional authorities, and commissions, the Senate studies that are going on, trying to complement those. But DMV Moves will be a big part of our retreat, and then report this fall. Transportation planning, Conti's team is hard at work with Visualize 2050. And also, I'll just note some roadway safety work that the TPB committed to doing last fall, putting some money behind. One of them, most notably, the issue of ticket reciprocity is something that Conti and I are working on, and his team is committed to. Again, not just making a recommendation to see that reciprocity becomes a policy, but actually enact that moving forward. The economic development work we talked about last year continues. It's been overtaken a little bit, not by events, these all merged together, but we have spent a lot of time talking about what is happening at the federal level, and to Senator Warner's observations about getting data all in one place. We have that at our site, and working with a lot of our partners, the Board of Trade, the Consortium of Colleges in Greater Washington Partnership, on kind of what are we doing now to upskill, retrain folks that are looking, and more to come on that at the retreat as well. But those would be kind of, and the one that's not up there that I would give a shout out, which was getting a fair amount of press, is Steve Bieber's water group looking at a secondary water source for the Potomac River. Many of our jurisdictions receive their water 100% from the Potomac River, and if something were to happen, we have less than a day of water supply for the region. So that is a major, major issue. We just need to look to our neighbors to the south in Richmond, what can happen if the water supply is disrupted, what that can do to a region. So that Steve was successful in securing a new start from the Army Corps, which is a really hard thing to do. The dollar value sometimes, it's not a ton of money. Once you get a new start with the Army Corps, it's a program that can be funded moving forward, and it is funded now at $3 million, and his team is doing quite a bit of work on that. Julie?
Okay, if you turn to slide 10, I'm sorry, or 9, this just sort of summarizes the updates in the FY26 work program from FY25. So there is a member dues rate increase of 3 cents from FY25. That's about $280,000. And that rate was decided back in October to 2024, which enables your budget folks to include that in their planning for their FY26 budgets. The operating revenue increased by almost 8 million. A piece of that, the 1.4 million, is from transportation, additional funding for existing programs. The biggest piece of it is the reclass of public safety revenue of 4.7 million, followed by the new HUD project, which is budgeted for next year at 3.2 million. Offsets by a slight decrease in revenue due to the completion of the 2 environmental projects. And the decrease in subrecipient is primarily because of the reclass of public safety revenue of 4.7 million, and that was offset then by an increase in enhanced mobility funding. And once again, the reserves are fully funded, and we will be back to you in the fall with the capital budget. And hopefully that will include the long-awaited renovation for our space.
Yeah, the timeline speaks for itself there. You see where we're at sitting on the timeline, and now would be the appropriate time, Chairman, for any discussion and motions, and hopefully we'll start July 1 with a new approved budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start by saying, before we open up the floor to questions, I'd like to make a motion, Resolution R18-2025 for consideration. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair Allen. We have a motion and a second to adopt the work program and budget. Is there any discussion at this point? Yes, you may. Mr. Maldonado.
Thank you. I have a question for Julie. When you were talking about the audit and the FTA, have you noticed any new language coming from our federal partners about what, in order to receive the money, what we have to agree to? Because we've seen some creative things coming across our desks.
Yes, more on the contract side than on the audit side, where they're sort of changing some of the requirements. Nothing that has been a hurdle to us so far. But yes, there is sort of a shift in some of the language and how we discuss things and where we're being told how to describe them.
And I would just say, we coordinate through AMPO and through NARCA, the 2 associations on transportation and regional councils. And so if we receive a request to change language, so does Houston, Galveston, Atlanta, and Salt Lake City and LA. And we're all in touch kind of 24/7, how folks are addressing that, how they're responding. And kind of to the senator's earlier point, when there are issues that are flagged that we need to make sure we engage all parts of the country on, we're doing that through our association. So there was a joint fly-in between those 2 associations a couple weeks ago. Lynn Erickson took part from TPB here at COG and knocking on lots of doors to explain kind of the importance of transportation funding. A lot of it right now has just been wording that hasn't impacted the substance of what we do.
And to that effort, I ask questions, right? I go back to our funders and say, I need clarification. You sent me a 1.5-page memo and I'm not exactly sure what it means. And so when we ask those questions, they're like, oh, good question. And then they come back and reaffirm, because I say, this is our policy. Are we in compliance? Is this okay? And they go back and review, and we get back that says, yes, you are fine. So I think that's the approach that we'll be taking, is to be very proactive in making sure that we ask the question and make sure what we're doing is what they're asking us to do, and we get that back in writing.
Okay, and Mayor Jordan, please.
Well, thank you very much, Julie, and thank you so much for your work on pulling this budget together. There's so much uncertainty. You mentioned something about in the conversations with the FTA, some back and forth about indirect cost. Where are you planning for that to land?
So what they decided to do is, sorry, this is a little technical. We used to, when there were changes in our fringe and leave rates, we would let those variances drop into the indirect rate. So they no longer want that to happen. They want to adjust those rates on an annual basis as well and try to track that on a 2-year lag. So it just really moves the costs into some different buckets. So if you look, we've generally looked at our overhead rates from a total factor. So in the end, which was a little ironic that they disallowed less than 0.5% of our submitted expenses, very minor. On $8 million, there was about $60,000 in costs that they decided were no longer allowable. And I think that was more of a change in interpretation of things than, we'd been doing it for years. But there was this change in methodology. So our overall rate, I would say, was like 2.48. And now with the changes in methodology, it's actually slightly higher, which I mentioned to them. I said, okay, this is actually a little bit higher. And they said, well, that's not what we're aiming for, but that's what the number is the number. So, like I said, it will cause some variances in the budget. You'll see it come through in the leave and the administrative, and then, so we're fine. It was challenging. It just took a lot of time.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Jordan. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Haritonis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question, just for my edification. So in slide number 9, you said that we reclassified the public safety revenue from pass-through to operating. Can you just give me an idea when we say pass-through, what we exactly mean? And, what is the triggering event that converts that into a operating revenue?
So it's a very technical, we work with our auditors on this to classify. There's like a 10-point checklist, and it's based on how the contract comes to us to decide how that is classified. So when the contracts were dug into, so we've always had them classified correctly in the audit. This is really lining our budget with our audited financial statement. So it was never an audit issue, more that we just didn't always budget the same way that we present our audited financial statements. So we're just trying to make sure this is in alignment.
Yeah, what I had in mind is try to find out whether this revenue actually helps here with, the overhead of the organization and the focus of the ability of the organization to do program delivery.
No, unfortunately, because overhead's only
directly.
overhead's only charged on direct labor. So none of this has a very much, all the direct labor was already captured in the operating. So this is just moving consulting costs mostly.
Got you. That's very important to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing no more, I will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. We'll move now to the approval of the minutes from our May 14th, 2025 meeting. Are there call for a motion? Is there a motion?
Moved.
Okay, thank you. And seconded. So are there any abstentions or nay votes? Okay, Mayor Stewart is, or excuse me. Council President Stewart, I can't help myself. I'm going back a little bit. Council President Stewart is abstaining. Any other abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it. The motion passes. Agenda item 7 is our consent agenda. We have on page 18 of the board package 3 resolutions. I would now move approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Chair Randall. We have a motion and a second. I will now call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. Thank you very much. And our next order of business, moving right along, is to get to item number 9, which I'm very delighted that we have this item on the agenda. So we have a COG Regional Crime Dashboard, which has been a project that this board talked about at its last leadership retreat. And I can see there's a substantial amount of work that's been done to develop this particular dashboard. over the last year, and we're excited to learn more about it here today. We're joined by the chair of the COG Police Chiefs Committee, Chief Russ Hamill from the city of Laurel. So thank you for being here. We also have COG Senior Policy Safety Planner, Eli Russ, so thank you as well. So with that, let me turn it over first to Mr. Mercer, and he'll give us a little bit of a primer on the dashboard, and then we'll hear remarks later from Chief Hamill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to recognize Senator Van Hollen's Chief of Staff, Tricia Russell, who's here behind me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and all of your support, and the senators as well. So near real-time crime dashboard. This is when I started a couple years ago here at the council. I think at my first meeting, we issued a crime report, which is super helpful for a lot of different aspects of looking at historical data on crime in the region. One of the observations that our members have consistently made, as has the press, not only and the public, not only in the DC region, but nationally, is that much crime data lags up to a year or more because it takes the FBI a while to confirm that a certain type of crime was in fact a certain type of crime. So by the time we aggregate that data and publish it, it is a year or more old. And we took that feedback and said, well, let's look around the country and see if anyone is displaying crime data in a way regionally that is more near real time. And they're not. And this is, to the best of our knowledge, this will be the first of its kind in the country, which is a dashboard that consolidates all 24 of our jurisdictions' crime reporting data. And I'll let Eli, who I want to give a big shout out to Eli Russ and John Snar from our staff, working, of course, with Scott Boggs, who runs the public safety team. Just a tremendous amount of work. One of the things that we were aware of is that your police chiefs, your sheriffs, have this information and report it to you or to your CAOs on a nearly monthly basis. Now, that will be properly described on this dashboard that perhaps has not been blessed yet by the FBI and that sort of thing. But we know the data generally exists, and that if we could just get folks to be comfortable with the process and trust in a process, we could display that regionally, which will allow us to do a couple of things. One is capture patterns in a way that we can respond to more effectively in real time. And two, it tells a much more accurate picture of what's happening in this region. And you'll see that real crime across the major categories is down year over year. Now, if we were to issue the report like we normally do, and then the data was a year plus old, it would tell a different story of what's happening. So I think rightfully this region got the message a couple years ago that we needed to double down on crime and bringing those numbers down, and the region has, and that's something that we should recognize and celebrate and recognize we still have more work to do. So with that kind of as a background to this, I will hand it off to Chief Hamill, who's been our longtime chair of the Police Chiefs Committee for COG. Chief?
Thank you, Clark, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. No pressure. So my current boss, Keith Sidner, the mayor of Laurel, sitting there with my old boss, Rich Madalino. One of my former students is sitting behind me. I'm just waiting for one of my nuns from grade school to walk in, talk about my hair touching my collar, which I promise to fix later. So, so I'm very pleased to be here today to have this discussion. As some of you may recall, last time I met with the entire board in 2023, we had a discussion about crime, and crime had upticked at that point. But what I was doing was talking about figures from 2022, which was problematic. So with the direction of the board and the Herculean work done by the COG staff, we've moved in the right direction here. So the annual crime reports that COG's been assembling and publishing for about 20 years now have provided law enforcement leadership and you all with the ability to review and evaluate crime data from a regional perspective. It's been valuable for all of us, and that information is actually included within the new dashboard's historical annual data set. So everybody will be able to go back and look what's happened over the past 20 years as well. That may not sound important, but it is. Be able to look at trends and see how we've addressed things in the past and how we can address things better going forward. So as you all said at the time, the COG board members, your executive director said today, our interconnected region needs access to more timely and actionable crime data that is more available to all. So that's why it's my pleasure now with the people that actually did the work to introduce the COG Regional Crime Data Dashboard for you today. So this is what we know, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit what I said earlier to the press. We know the people committing the crimes in our communities aren't stopping at the lines, jurisdictional lines. And I can speak, and I'm not the angry guy you saw on TV maybe a couple weeks ago if you saw it, but just a couple weeks ago, we had 121 cars broken into in the Laurel region. That touched 4 separate jurisdictions, 3 counties and us. Now, yes, we were able to bring that case to closure, and but it's Herculean work, particularly by a couple of my detectives who spent hours upon hours going back, looking at information that was available to them and making connections throughout the region. This makes that easier. Knowing what the reports were, knowing what was occurring real time makes that job easier for them and probably would have saved us a lot of work hours on that case. So with the support of the police chiefs and you all, the COG staff worked very hard to develop this new dashboard. With the transition of crime reporting classifications in the region to follow the FBI NIBRS model, COG worked with its member governments to create this free, publicly available platform on COG's website. Publicly available is critically important for our transparency efforts. This dashboard provides decision makers a near real-time understanding of crime throughout the region and capturing statistics from several days ago all the way back 20 years, as I discussed earlier. So the benefits, the dashboard allows for a common regional picture of crime to be developed alongside a capability to benchmark statistics. Users are able to broadly identify regional long-term crime trends, as well as these short-term crime spikes that adversely affect the people we serve. We can compare specific or multiple types of offenses in other jurisdictions and reach regional totals. Moreover, the dashboard will enable our jurisdictions to continue to focus on reducing crime and mitigating public misperceptions about the prevalence of crime in our communities, which we're all aware of sometimes. The one vehicle break-in in a community becomes 14 of them because of different connections people have. And we're able to do is calm the community's concerns by having this real-time information available to us and direct people. And as I said earlier, 2 cars broken into in a community is a problem, because if that's your car, we know the residual effects of that. You're having to pay for your deductible to get your car fixed. Your car's out of service. You're not able to get to work. You're not able to support your family. Not able to get your children to events they need to become well-rounded, productive members of society. This does not discount the issues those matters bring to the table. We will still address those. We'll address those properly. But what we're able to do is control the community fear over something that really isn't at that level. So with greater crime data transparency within the region, hopefully we can expect increased public cooperation, higher crime reporting rates, greater community trust, and more effective crime prevention throughout our communities. We also believe the dashboard will be a very useful resource for members of the media, community groups, and the general public. And I'm not just saying that because the media is over there, that we actually had that written before they showed up. Developing a process and platform for gathering and displaying this information was no small task. So really hats off to the COG staff on this. Their efforts working with the various police and sheriff's agencies to determine their preferred method and frequency for submitting real-time crime data, as well as so many other logistical matters that you can only imagine when we bring all these departments in together to try to collate the information. Frankly, if it was easy, this would have been done a long time ago. It wasn't easy. Just as a point of reference, the COG dashboard is currently ingesting data from 9 sources, each with their own automated mechanism to integrate that data. Additionally, a few local police agencies have recently built similar crime dashboards, which speaks to their positive strategic direction and also the value of this regional dashboard. As we run through our demonstration of the dashboard, we'll observe current regional crime trends, which are shown on the slides. When you compare year-to-date this year to year-to-date last year through the end of April, what we're seeing now is an overall decrease in crime regionally by 13%. We're seeing reductions across different crime categories. Robberies are down 32%. Homicides are down 30%. Rapes, sexual assaults down 23%. Aggravated assaults are down 21%. Aggravated assaults would be the felonious assault.
We also know the crime decreased going from 23 to 2024 now, and we're closely going to watch 2025, and hopefully we'll continue this downward trend in this region. During the discussion portion of this presentation, I'll be glad to talk more about these crime trends with members of the board and how area law enforcement agencies have focused on driving this trend down, as well as region-wide crime rates down. Now I'll turn it over to Eli Russ to walk through the dashboard and some of its features. Thank you, Eli.
Thank you, Chief Hamill and Clark. My name's Eli Russ. I serve as the project manager for the dashboard project. I'd like to acknowledge the project team members, including COG's Department of Homeland Security and Public Safety's Managing Director, Scott Boggs, and the project technical manager, John Snar, for their critical roles in realizing this project. As you can see on the screen, you're first brought to a splash page, which provides a project overview as well as contact information to route questions, including so we can appropriately direct questions on local crime trends to your broken down into 4 sections: real-time crime, historical crime, data dictionary, and about the data. I'd like to start by showing the first tab of the dashboard, which examines real-time data from 2024 to 2025 using the FBI's National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS, classifications. I'll note the District of Columbia is providing data, but it's using the DC Index Crime classifications, and we've worked with them to caveat how those compare to NIBRS. The first visualization at the top of the page highlights the high-level trends over the past year that Chief Hamill outlined, and its percentages that serve as a quick pulse check on tracking crime trends from a regional perspective. These percentages will adjust every few days and include a 45-day lag to account for varying data reporting frequencies. With additional data incoming in a few months, the current exclusions in place for this chart for Frederick County, the city of Frederick, and Charles County will be removed. From there, users can view data for one or multiple jurisdictions, including by groupings based on population size, as well as countywide aggregations for Maryland counties. You can also filter for crimes against people and property subtotals, or for the following specific offenses, which we've been tracking for over 20 years: homicide, robbery, rape, aggravated assault, motor vehicle theft, burglary, and larceny. The dashboard's real-time information for each jurisdiction updates at various frequencies and can include built-in lags from the time the data is received to the time that the data is displayed in the dashboard. This ranges from daily to every other day to 1 to 2 weeks and monthly, based on the source and by an agency's request. This approach strikes a balance between providing partial data as soon as it's available versus providing a more complete picture of crime for a recent date to see high-level comparisons. The line graph addresses regional trends by looking at the sums of crime in the region on a monthly basis, starting with the prior month. Like the graphs below it, information can be filtered by crime type and jurisdiction. As previously discussed, crime is down across the region compared to this period last year, though from initial reporting in May, we do anticipate the homicide totals to uptick. These 2 graphs outline the selected crimes and jurisdictions on a monthly basis to further examine crime at a regional level. A user can hover their mouse over a chart, as you can see, as well as click to drill down into a data table for a more granular view. This final line graphs looks at near real-time data for many dashboard participants. It gives users the ability to drill down into, to look at crime over particular days in the previous 2 weeks. And lastly, the final 2 tables outline the same information we just discussed, but provides it in a tabular format. The second tab of the dashboard features the historic crime data that was sourced from previous annual crime reports going back to 2002. Leveraging both real-time and historic sets of data will allow for deeper analysis of regional crime trends over periods of time in ways that were not previously available. These charts show historic motor vehicle thefts in the region per year for COG members of medium population size, as an example of how a specific crime can be analyzed for trends ranging from a few days to over 20 years using this dashboard. This tab is like the real-time crime tab in that it includes line graphs, a bar chart, and data tables to measure crimes in the region over a single or a range of years. It also includes a line graph on regional sums per crime over the past 20 years, as well as a weighted measurement of crimes of jurisdictions 1,000 residents to qualify the data to local contexts. Next, I want to highlight the dashboard's data dictionary and about the data tabs, which are important for users to understand the capabilities and the limitations of the dashboard. These tabs outline the sources and the caveats of the data as to how it can be interpreted, including specifying the source and update frequency for each jurisdiction's data. It also includes links to local crime reporting information, such as local reports or crime maps, so users have the most comprehensive picture of crime within their community. I want to illustrate an example pathway for how we ingest, transpose, and display data for this project. We connected to 8 different local or state data repositories or local crime dashboards to display data. So taking Prince George's County as an example, who are collecting crime from their county open data portal via an automated process called a REST API. Once the data is pulled each afternoon from this county portal, we categorize the collected offenses to NIBRS classifications and then display the data using a 1-day lag to account for the source's latency. We worked with the county police to establish a similar mechanism to receive data for the municipalities within the county. In conclusion, we're planning additional enhancements to the dashboard in the weeks and months ahead, and we're planning to open participation to local, state, regional, and federal agencies. So I just wanted to thank you for your time and extend our appreciation to those who've closely collaborated with us amongst our law enforcement chiefs and their technical teams on this project. As stated, it's the only one that we're aware of its kind in the nation, so we're excited as a region to be leading on this important topic. So thank you again for your advocacy and your partnership, and we're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Let me start by saying thank you to Chief Hamill and then to Mr. Russ as well for the exceptional work that you've done on this dashboard. And I do think if David Snyder were here, he would also be expressing his great support for the work that you've done, because he was one of the most vociferous members of this board about this issue. I appreciate some comments that you made, Mr. Hamill, and before we kind of hand off questions to my colleagues, I wanted to maybe ask you a couple really fast. The first is you made reference to some of the real-time crime centers that are kind of popping up across the region. How do you see this crime dashboard working in conjunction with those real-time crime centers to help us address crime that crosses jurisdictional boundaries? Because I think you were referencing that earlier in your speaking.
So quickly, the centers in the specific jurisdictions will give them the picture of what's occurring in their jurisdiction. But currently in Laurel, I have Prince George's County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, and Montgomery County touching my borders in some form or fashion. So the case I brought up from a couple of weeks ago, and this is just a snapshot of one case. It happens every day. They hit every one of those places. This gives you a quicker, as I mentioned, the work it took to get all that together was incredible. This type of mechanism, my officers can't go in the Montgomery County crime, daily crime reports. This regional output, they're able to go in right away, look at and go, oh, okay, this hit everybody. We need to get together and attack this problem here. And prior to coming to Laurel, I was a Montgomery County police officer. So we had Fairfax, Frederick County, District of Columbia touching us. There was a lot. I look back now when I was I was young at one point. When I was a young officer, I'd have welcomed this as a detective.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. And then second, quickly, just thinking about the use of emerging technology, so license plate readers, AI, and others, how are they helping us to address some of the criminality in the region as well?
Well, I can point at that case in particular. That information that you just brought up helped solve that case. and it helps solve many cases. You look, it's that information being collated together and us being able to share it. We can track, so I've been here a long time. When the snipers were here, we'd have welcomed this because we've been able very quickly to track them across jurisdictional borders, being able to set parameters on the information we need. And I was in that case from day one. That wouldn't have been 3 weeks in October. That probably would have been about 10 days in October. And that flat out would have saved lives.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Any other questions from members of the board here? Okay, Ms. Ashton?
Thank you. That was an excellent report, and thank you for pulling this new tool together. I think it's going to be extremely helpful. I have a question about hate crimes. We are seeing hate crimes going up across the region. I know that we've been tracking them locally in the state of Maryland as well. I'm wondering if that could be a category that is added at some point, or maybe it is and I didn't see it, but I wanted to flag that given the increasing rhetoric and some of the things that we're seeing going on in the region. I think it's important to track.
Is it in there yet? So it is not available yet, but I think we're baby steps now.
Yeah.
This thing's going to look a lot different a year from now than it looks right now. And the people doing the hate crimes, they're doing them across jurisdictional lines.
That's
We
right.
know that. And I grew up in Rockville, so I'm familiar with some of the issues you're having. And they're the same people touching other areas as well. So, that's a great point for us to, baby steps, but at a quicker pace.
Yeah, you've done a fantastic job. I guess it's on the whatever, if the 2.0 version, perhaps we could have that. And I saw the city drop down. I'm not sure if Rockville's on there, but if there's anything, I'm sure there are other jurisdictions who may want to be included. Maybe it's there. But
It is.
anyway, if there's anything that we need to do to help you to make this even better, we're here for it.
And thank you very much. And I think that's also for your police chiefs and their command staffs. It's going to be critical for them to talk this up with their partners next door who may not be in this, if they could, please.
Okay.
I would just,
And-
and I would just add, Eli and his team have done tremendous work with Mr. Schnarr, but we're committed to keeping this dashboard up moving forward and be in real time. We need to keep collecting this information. So one, just looping back with your chiefs, with your CAOs, making sure they all are aware. We pre-briefed this with the CAOs, but making sure that they're aware. If they have feedback on how to improve this, let us know. And to your point, if there's things that we can add, we've talked, for example, with WMATA about adding some of their statistics in, and we want to grow this, but it's all predicated on, good data in and good data out on this sort of thing. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Allen.
Thanks. I'm going to echo what a lot of us have said, which, for the last number of years, we'd have these conversations, these briefings, and we're looking at year-old data that it's helpful to some degree, but to some degree it's not helpful. It doesn't really help inform the conversation at the moment. So just a massive kudos to the hard work that it took to pull this together.
Yeah.
Obviously, a tool is only as good as we can use it, or what can we do with it? So as policymakers, one of the question I had is, as we look at the data that's in, and I would imagine each of us is going to have different pressure points when we see, either reports of crime going up or going down. Well, what are you going to do about it? What's the policy change you're going to make? Does the data retroactive in terms of how far back does this data go, so that we also can help evaluate as each of us take different policy steps or policy interventions? Are we seeing an impact in that, or is that really been more prospective? Kind of, we have this set of data, and so now we can look at that moving forward.
No, thank you for the question. So with this large data set, right, so we're looking at things that happened from a few days ago all the way back to 2002. We can have another tool in the toolbox to evaluate current practices, identify, room for improvement or continuation of certain best practices, and continuing to spread that across the region. It's critical, and it happens on a regular basis at the Police Chiefs Committee. Your police executives from across the region are coming together, sharing that type of information, collaborating with one another, having face-to-face time, because we understand that, crime in one community is going to impact another, and we want to make sure we have all the tools at our disposal to be able to address that. So to your point, if you take a look at the annual data tab, right, you can start to see, and you'll have to hover your mouse, and there's opportunities to be able to see this in a table format as well. But you can see across a number of crime categories, we generally held fairly similar, fairly standard, with a few exceptions.
That's helpful. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much for that presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing more reports as it unfolds. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so we'll now move to our agenda item number 10. So we have as our final item on today's meeting, we're joined by the National Association of Counties Executive Director and CEO, Matthew Chase, to discuss the components of the reconciliation bill and how it will most impact local governments. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Mr. Chase.
I am not Mr. Chase, but
I know
he is
that.
walking directly over from his office, so he'll be here
Oh.
in just a minute. So, Chair, if you might
Sure.
want to, I know when we were opening up with our remembrances of Supervisor Hudgens and Congressman Connolly, if anyone wanted to add anything, we thought there might be some interest in other folks. Oh, Matt's walking in right now. Well, I know
Okay, if
everyone
you
wanted
want.
to wait, add something.
Then maybe we can see
Yeah.
if we have time at the end.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's fine. So, Mr. Chase, we were just welcoming you here to the meeting. So we thank you for coming over and giving us this update on the impacts of the reconciliation bill. And we'll give you a second to get situated, and you can share your remarks with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. That long walk across the street. So we made it safe, pedestrian safety. So it's great to see a lot of familiar faces. Chair Randall was in our office just yesterday or 2 days ago doing a podcast with U.S. Senator Murphy on social isolation and some of the serious issues that we're facing across the country. So thank you all, and thanks to Clark, who has been a great collaborator. Just for some background, before I joined the National Association of Counties, I ran a national association that serves council of governments. So I spent 20 years actually working on regional issues. And so I'm very familiar with WashCOG and really appreciate the opportunity. So just on the federal landscape, you all obviously live and breathe this. You live in this region and pay attention to it far more than probably the average local elected official. We're really thinking about things in 4 different buckets. The first one are the executive orders and how they're impacting cities and counties, in our case, counties, particularly around the federal funding freeze, diversity, equity, inclusion, some of the climate work as well, elections, and of course, immigration is front and center. So we can talk about that if there's time, but clearly what we are seeing is early on we saw federal funding freezes, and now what we are seeing is a lot of changing in language around terms and conditions of federal awards. We really saw early out of the Department of Transportation, out of EPA, in Health and Human Services, and we are seeing inconsistencies in those terms and conditions. But you as elected officials or your department heads who may sign these agreements, I'm sure are spending a lot of time with your councils looking through what is diversity, equity, inclusion, especially when they say you can't have a policy program or, quote, an activity. And what does an activity mean in that context? So a lot of potential legal jeopardy there. I'll just hit real quick on the sanctuary jurisdiction issue. And what we are reminding our members of is to really read the executive order from April 28th very closely on sanctuary jurisdictions. There are 5 laws that the administration is using very aggressively against certain state and local elected officials around obstruction of justice, unlawfully harboring and hiring illegal aliens, around conspiracy against the U.S., conspiracy to impede local law enforcement is probably the most used, and then even racketeering and influence, the so-called mob law. So I would be very intentional about making sure you're reviewing those statutes and seeing what you can and cannot do. Some folks are willingly choosing to step over that line. And of course, there's a lot of litigation and different legal action around that. When it comes to the sanctuary jurisdiction list, what the White House and Department of Homeland Security has told us is they've pulled it down from the website, but they are still using it. And they are still working to fine tune the list. that the initial list was produced by the Department of Homeland Security. It most likely will move over to the Department of Justice with the Attorney General, but we are encouraging them to just not move forward with it and to abandon it. That doesn't seem to be the path they're taking. And our challenges with that list have been, one, that the criteria wasn't transparent. We don't know how jurisdictions ended up on that list. Quite honestly, it included 3 or 4 counties that don't exist. I mean, we laugh, but they literally don't exist. Misspellings and that kind of thing. We had 9 counties in Nebraska who ended up on the list, and they don't even own a county jail. These are incredibly small rural counties. When asked, do you collaborate with ICE on when you release your inmates? They said no. Nobody bothered to ask, do you actually own a jail? So those are some of the real issues that we're dealing with. And in that issue, there are basically 4 criteria that we think, but we can't confirm that they seem to be using. One is the 287G ICE cooperation statute, where you as a local jurisdiction can voluntarily cooperate with ICE, put your law enforcement through training, have to follow certain certification guidelines, certain criteria. That list has grown exponentially. There are a lot of jurisdictions across the country who have willingly, voluntarily joined that. But the key is voluntarily. And what we're seeing is a push to make it more and more mandatory. And of course, we are seeing certain states aggressively join that program. The second one is the ICE detainer holds for the counties in the room that own jails, where you can voluntarily notify ICE when an inmate is being released. You don't have to, but certainly the administration's putting pressure on you to do that. And second is to ask the immigration status or the legal status of those inmates. Where the ICE detainer issue is front and center for us is an ICE detainer is a warrantless piece of paper. It is really a piece of paper for a federal official notifying a other federal official. It is not an order of the court. So when a local jurisdiction honors the ICE detainer request 48 hours beyond the court releasing you, the city or county or state holds the liability. We have seen counties across the country in the last 10 years plus honor ICE detainer request, holding people beyond the court order release up to 48 hours. And almost all of those have lost lawsuits. Suffolk County, New York is paying out over $60 million in a class action suit. And so I would really urge you to talk to your attorneys in this area. Probably none of you are voluntarily doing that. But we are seeing certain federal courts in the Texas, Alabama, Louisiana area actually mandating cities and counties to honor those, even though in our view, it's a violation of certain constitutional rights around due process. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. I think why I was asked here, and Clark did tell me, I've just had kind of a frantic couple of days, is around budget reconciliation. So obviously, don't have to tell you all, it's a $4 trillion+ billion piece of legislation. For us, we have a real focus on 3 or 4 items. Number 1 was protecting tax-exempt municipal bonds. So far, the House protected municipal bonds. The Senate is indicating that they will as well. But as they struggle to get 50 votes, we're not taking anything for granted. And the only reason municipal bonds are on the potential hit list is to raise federal revenue. So by getting rid of tax-exempt municipal bonds, the federal government could generate about $280 billion in new revenue. Who pays that? Not the localities. You pay it a different way through higher borrowing cost, but who the bond holders would have to be paying federal income tax on those bonds. Who holds those bonds? Institutional investors, but also grandma. Usually those are the safest long-term investments. So people as they age want safe investments, so they buy municipal bonds for the tax advantage. If the tax advantage went away, our borrowing costs as state and local government would go up about 210 basis points. So in Maryland and Virginia, where you have schools under the counties, just think about your borrowing costs going up 2.1% per school. Just not, it would raise about $800 billion in state and local cost over 10 years. The second one is Medicaid. And we have counties in 30 states that administer or have some role in Medicaid, including sometimes providing the non-federal match. States like New York, the counties pay billions a year in local property tax for the Medicaid match for the state. So, in this area, obviously District of Columbia is facing increased cost, over $1 billion a year, Maryland in the billions, and Virginia as well. I believe Virginia has a trigger law on Medicaid expansion population. So if your 90% federal match rate on Medicaid expansion goes away, the expansion trigger kicks in, I believe. I'm not sure what happened in your legislative session, so they didn't. So, but Medicaid is obviously a big issue for us since counties provide indigent care in over 1,000 hospitals across the U.S. On SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, obviously a big deal, particularly for counties in Virginia, where they have to pay 15% of the administrative cost. What we are seeing there is a very clever strategy. Whoever wrote it is quite honestly brilliant, and that they don't change the eligibility per se for SNAP. What they do is two things. Number one is they add a new administrative cost match for states, and therefore counties in 10 different states, including Virginia, would have to start picking up a higher percentage of the match, from a 50-50 federal state cost match to a 75 for the states and therefore counties, 25% for the federal government. That's a huge cost shift, obviously, down to the local level. But that's not the end of the story. The next piece is on the benefits. Right now, SNAP is 100% federally funded for the actual benefit to recipients. What would happen is the match rate, states would now have a match. It would start out at 5%, and it could go up to 25% based on what they call the error rate of overpayments and underpayments to the recipients. Many states, your error rates fluctuate each year. History is informative, but they change how you would actually calculate your error rate. So they're moving to something called zero tolerance. Right now, a recipient, their income can be off by $35. Under the new bill, your variation would be zero. So that means the states and the counties would have to hire more personnel and have more administrative cost to keep your error rate down. So you would have to spend tens of millions to avoid your higher benefit rate at hundreds of millions, if not billions, for certain states. So the example that we use is in Ohio, the counties are responsible for SNAP eligibility, and they look at the eligibility of recipients twice a year. Under the House bill, they'll have to start looking at their eligibility every time the recipient's income changes. So most of these individuals, especially with the work requirements, are going to be hourly employees. So if you're an hourly employee and you also have overtime, your paycheck changes almost every paycheck. And again, they went from a $35 variation to a zero tolerance. So you got to be to the penny. And so why that matters is the higher your error rate, the higher your benefit match rate goes up to 25%. So those two things that I talked about will generate about $290 billion in new federal revenue or reduced cost, actually in this case. So I want to leave time for Q&A, and I don't know how we're doing exactly on time, but we obviously have the president's budget as well, where the skinny budget came out early, the full budget just came out more recently. It cuts non-defense spending by about $160 billion. The vast majority of the state and local programs take cuts. We're still trying to save FEMA and the federal role in disaster mitigation. But what we are seeing, it's, again, very clever, where they're pre-funding $150 billion in defense spending in the budget reconciliation bill. They also took key titles of the Farm Bill, particularly the commodity titles and the conservation titles, and pre-funded them in the tax bill, knowing that if they cut SNAP in the tax budget bill, Democrats won't vote for a Farm Bill later in the year. So they took the pieces that they want in the Farm Bill, commodities and conservation, and pre-funded it in the tax bill. I bring that up because it may help us, ironically, in the end, with a continuing resolution. So we're facing $160 billion in cuts to non-defense programs, behavioral health, public health, HUD Community Development Block Grant, home program, homelessness program, a bunch of different programs. Our best outcome might be a continuing resolution of existing funding levels. Obviously not ideal, but it could be the best outcome. And again, they pre-funded a lot of defense and immigration investments in the tax bill to hedge against not being able to complete the 2026 appropriations process. So a lot more going on there, from the broadband programs to infrastructure to FEMA reform. And Mr. Chairman, if there's time, certainly glad to answer any questions. And thank you for your time. And really want to thank Clark and COG for being great partners.
So Mr. Chase, if you wanted to add any other comments, we do have time, so you don't have to truncate your presentation at this point. I'll give you that opportunity if you wanted to discuss any other areas as well.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, you know, the role of the National Association of Counties, the role of the National League of Cities and others, U.S. Conference of Mayors, is we're an intergovernmental partner. We're not a partisan organization. We're paid every day to be an advocate for county government. And what we are seeing is our members being squeezed. We're seeing you be squeezed from the federal level, and we anticipated this coming out of the COVID era where there was record federal investment. We anticipated the pendulum to swing the other way. It's just kind of the cycle. But what we probably didn't anticipate was states, in some cases, also preempting locals, putting prohibitions on locals, even in Virginia, where your Dillon rule state, maybe taking it to another level, and really squeezing you with roles and responsibilities that don't go away. And so I think groups like COG are just so important for you to share ideas, share resources, think regionally, because we are going to go into an era of scarcity probably, and just having to be real smart about where we dedicate resources. The other piece that's probably very unique to this region, and sorry for the District of Columbia folks know far more about this than I probably do, but the U.S. House just passed a bill that basically says, if you are a sanctuary jurisdiction, we are going to relocate federal offices. So in this case, it was the U.S. Small Business Administration to say, if you are on the sanctuary list, we're going to remove federal offices. You know, is that a shot across the bow? Is that real? I think we take everything seriously. We don't take anything for granted. But that obviously would have a huge impact on this region if they start trying to relocate things. And even if it's just small disruptive agencies, it's still something that you all are going to have to deal with.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll see if there are any questions from my colleagues, but maybe if I could just ask one to start. Is there any information you would want to share relative to any of the Department of Housing and Urban Development programs, thinking about the need for us to really figure out how we can provide more affordable housing in this region, and particularly in my own county, we have a goal, a pretty ambitious one, and I'll say it requires funding from the state and the federal governments for us to be able to successfully do that.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of changes in both the big GSEs, the Fannies, Freddies, as well as some of the programs at HUD. On the big policy changes, that's not my exact area of expertise. On the grant level, as far as the Community Development Block Grant Program, the home program, some of the continuum of care programs, those are all on the chopping block. And I think we really have to do a better job as intergovernmental partners is explaining the difference between affordable housing and housing affordability. And that affordable housing is often viewed as Section 8. Housing affordability is something that this region faces regardless of income, and that's complex. And we're working with Clark and his team around the explosion of data centers, around the impact of AI, And what we are seeing across the country is, what we're really talking about is land use. And what do we use for open space, recreation, agriculture versus housing, commercial development, industrial development. And so we are talking to HUD about, we need the whole continuum of housing. We are seeing attacks on local government, of course, at the federal level in some cases, but increasingly at the state level. And it's interesting not to take too big of a shot at the home builders because they are partners.
Right.
But in one meeting, they told us they had record profits last year. And on the other hand, they told us it's because of our local regulations that housing is unaffordable. So maybe two things can be true at the same time. And I think we can all work together to think through. But every time we talk about housing, we also have to talk about insurance and how we have record numbers of counties who are facing disasters. We now have about a third of our members who have a natural disaster that rises to level of a presidential declaration. So over 900 counties a year. And those disasters are increasing cost, particularly for insurance, but also to build smart and to build, we see in Florida, you can tell which era of building code the house was built to after a storm, because the ones that are standing were modern codes, and that costs more money.
Right.
But I think that's where groups like COG can come in and help with model codes and really helping drive down that cost.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Mr. Mercer?
I just wanted to thank Matt for being here. When, I was at this conference the last couple of days, and folks were talking about their monthly meetings and who they have come speak, and, mentioning that we have a sitting U.S. Senator coming to give us a legislative update. And Matt is requested throughout the entire country and counties that belong in all of our states and literally right across the street. So we are really lucky to be able to tap into folks. And AI policy is a great example. When IT director, several months ago, I'm working on IT, AI policy. It's like, well, have we talked to anyone about that? Is it consistent with the region? And we know folks are grappling with this. It's a call away and talk to Matt and, oh yeah, this is something nationally that we're working on. Do you want to partner? And we can help host you for a meeting and get you the very best information. So ask away, because Matt is being requested every day to go all around the country and answer questions as to what's happening a few blocks away. And just thank you for being here and your partnership.
Well, I would just say, I'm looking around here and I see a lot of our active members, and I read Executive Fitzwater's press releases or Board Chair Randall's and all of you, and I live in Arlington County. So I would just leave you with a couple things of storytelling, the importance of storytelling in the moment, that if we approach the current landscape as government to government, the public doesn't trust any level of government at this point. I mean, maybe Congress has an 8% approval rating, but local governments isn't that much higher. And we often talk in bureaucratic terms, we talk in dollars, and what we're really trying to do is humanize what you all do and what you all lead. And we are really trying to explain, I'll take Medicaid. Our response to Capitol Hill has been, counties are the social safety net. We've been that since the shores of Virginia in 1634. We take care of the indigent. That's what we were chartered to do, among many other things. But where is the conversation about getting 8 to 12 million people onto non-government insurance? So if the plan is to move people off Medicaid or CHIPs for the youth, what is the transition plan to get them non-governmental insurance? So counties don't want to just absorb hundreds of billions, in this case, $890 billion in Medicaid cuts, can't just move to the state and local level. We've got to engage the private sector. We've got to engage the nonprofit community, the philanthropic community. And so we're trying to be part of the solution to say, yeah, we don't want folks to have uninsured. We don't want them showing up at ERs. We don't want them to not have preventative care that's longer. We don't want to use our jails as primary health providers and behavioral health centers. So what is the alternative? And right now, there's really not an alternative. And Chair Randall's actually leads our health committee, and she's going to have gray hair soon, I can tell you. And so it's a tough issue.
Okay, I've got two on deck, Supervisor Walkinshaw and then Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for coming. This is maybe as much of a comment as a question, but you might have some thoughts to add to it. You know, with respect to the threat, the explicit threat that the so-called sanctuary jurisdictions will lose federal funding, federal facilities, it occurs to me that it's really important for us to articulate that issue as being not actually about immigration, because really the fundamental issue is the President of the United States wanting to be the mayor, chair of the Board of Supervisors, town council member for every jurisdiction in the United States of America. And that's in effect what would happen if those plans are effectuated. If the President of the United States can say that any jurisdiction who disagrees with me on X loses every dollar of federal funding or federal facilities related to issue Y, then the system of federalism that has, been inherent in our institutions for centuries is over. Essentially, the president is now dictating any local policy that he or she wants. And I've been to the NACO conference, so I know that the membership has a diverse spectrum of views on immigration issues and all kinds of things at the federal level. But I suspect that's a principle that can unite your members and League of Cities members and others, that we really do not want to go down that road, whatever you might think about the current status in the country with respect to immigration.
Yeah, just responding in general, I think you're right where the 10th Amendment still has states' rights. There still is a federalism framework. I think the sanctuary issue is a great case study in that, where 3 of the 4 criteria that I mentioned that they're putting jurisdictions potentially on the list, because we don't know, are voluntary activities. That there is a public pressure campaign to evolve them into being perceived as mandatory, but they're not. They're voluntary. And the court case that may or may not save us at the end of the day, ironically, is when certain states sued on the Medicaid expansion, the Kansas case, where Justice Roberts said, quote, federal government can't put a gun to the head of states to coerce them into action through the use of federal funds. And I may not get the end quote right, but the gun to the head is a very memorable quote in that case, where one, there has to be a nexus, at least under court precedent. They can always change it, but the court precedent is you can't withhold funds for early childhood when it's dealing with immigration. Like there's no nexus between those. So you all know this better as well as I do. The courts are slow, they're uneven, they're unpredictable. If history holds, I think we'll come out on top of a lot of these, but there's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of suffering in the interim, and it takes years. But as far as our membership goes, we are sticking to, we believe in the U.S. Constitution. I joke with some folks, maybe inappropriately, I said, you're reading the Articles of Confederation. Like we stopped using that document. We're using the U.S. Constitution. And, you really do need to study modern federalism, and hopefully it holds. I will say on this, if you saw the press release from the National Sheriff's Association, they really came unglued when this list came out. And there were several sheriffs in the Oval Office when he signed the executive order, and they obviously felt burnt that their jurisdictions then were on the list. And so I remind folks, the more we can put law enforcement out there, the better. And we will stand up too, but it definitely helps in this issue to have law enforcement out there explaining about community trust, explaining about court orders, and that you can't just accept a warrantless federal ICE detainer request when it's not an order of the court.
Okay, Mr. Glass? Thank you very much.
Explaining we're losing, right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Matt, I think you're making a great pitch for the NACO conference in Philadelphia. Do you want to tell us the dates as well? But I just only
Can't trust me on dates.
only a little bit. I appreciate the comments by Supervisor Walkinshaw, particularly about NACO membership, right? Understanding that by numbers, there are more Republican counties than Democratic counties, and trying to get everybody to understand the existential threat that we are experiencing. And partisan politics might be what they are, but the rule of law and our system of federalism has been going on for 200 plus years, right? And so I think there's a lot there to talk about, particularly at the conference, which I'll be at for a few days. But I wanted to focus a little bit more on the list of items and priorities that you had noted. From Medicaid and healthcare services, the chair mentioned HUD and housing, another equally important issue. For me, what worries me is the Department of Education, the dismantling of that, and specifically the $113 million that Montgomery County gets for Title I programs. And curious if in your conversations and that of your organizations, if there's anything that you can share regarding the future of the Department of Ed and how it will interact with counties, and notably all of the counties here are the primary funder for, right, the systems that we have in Maryland and Virginia, unlike other places. But in addition to Department of Ed, anything else that concerns you that you haven't already mentioned?
Yeah, and thank you. And I will get you to your question. Just on our conference, I just came from an all-staff meeting that we had around, we're celebrating our 90th anniversary. At the same time, we're kicking off the country's 250 celebration, and reflecting around when county officials were called into the Pentagon for the Cuban Missile Crisis, or we were saving gasoline during World War II and counties were having to save this, and all these different historical moments. And it really does put into perspective that it takes leadership to get out of these, and we don't take anything for granted. So just thank you all. On Department of Education, I would just say in general, we don't know. I think the courts are going to have a lot to say. Congress is going to have a lot to say. From a county perspective, obviously in Virginia and Maryland, you're a little unique with North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alaska, where counties have a substantial role in K through 12. Our message has been, these kids don't go away. Their needs don't go away. It's why NACO launched a 0 to 3 early childhood initiative a couple of years ago. Is the science told us, based, many other factors, but you can look at second and fifth grade reading levels and predict your future jail populations to some degree. And, there's a lot of arguments about it. But the point being, you can stop funding kids with special needs. You can stop funding kids who are in bad situations or lack food and security, but you're going to pay as a society at some point. And so I think the challenge we have is to make it nonpartisan, to make it about the kids. And how do we explain to residents, you're going to pay one way or the other. You're going to pay now, or you're going to pay through court costs, jail costs, unemployment. You're going to pay it one way. And you all are better at that than I am, but I just think we've got to do a better job of explaining to folks that these aren't handouts. These are like essential investments in our future. And thank you for the promo, Mr. Blass.
Okay, we have one more question, and that is from Mayor Seidnor.
Thank you, Mr. Chase, for the presentation. Do you recall the the order for the sanctuary order?
I do. Probably have it somewhere. Rick Hart, who's with me as well. Rick is our Director of Intergovernmental Affairs.
Thank you.
He will, here it is. It's April 28th. I don't have the number on it, but it's protecting American communities from criminal aliens. And definitely April 28th, 2025, definitely have your council look at both sides of that, including like what you cannot do, where they're aggressively prosecuting, as well as some insights into maybe how they're determining the list.
Yeah, and one more follow-up question. We don't have a detention center in our city as well, but you mentioned something about 48 hours. Can you go back over that?
So what happens with ICE in particular is the easiest way to deport somebody is to find them when they're already incarcerated. And what they ask sheriffs or jailers to do is to notify ICE when you're going to be releasing somebody. So that's issue number one. But then what ICE will do is they'll issue what's called a detainer request to a local jurisdiction or to the state and say, you're going to release this person noon on Monday. We can't get there. Can you give us 48 hours after the court has ordered the release of the inmate to come pick them up? That's where counties have been exposed to legal liability because the court has ordered the release and now you're holding them for a different charge that they haven't had due process for. And that's where there's a lot of public pressure to say, you know, you're bad people if you're not honoring those ICE detainer requests. And that's where, in particular, our sheriffs are saying, well, we're not going to defy a judge. We're not going to defy a court order. And so, again, there's a few states in the South where the federal courts have ordered they should still hold, but the vast majority, including this area of the country, should not be holding.
Okay, and one follow-up question. I had a great opportunity to work for the DC Pretrial Services Agency, and when a defendant would come into the office, we would run a warrant on that defendant. And even though he got a pressing charge in Washington, DC, but he might have a warrant in Prince George County or in Virginia, and they want that. So we will call the DC police, and they would take that person in custody. They will hold that person until Virginia or Prince George County. Is that the same process?
I don't know enough about it to answer, but it would be the local, probably the local law, whether it's DC. Now, there is another bill in this bill in Congress as well that would treat the District of Columbia differently and actually mandating some certain new parameters on DC, and I would defer to DC on that.
Okay. I was just wondering because it's kind of similar. And they don't, the jurisdiction don't come pick that person up in a certain amount of time, then in DC jail will release that person back into the community. That way they won't hold them past that time. So I thought it was something similar to what ICE was doing.
Yeah, and just on immigration, it's complicated because some of these violations are criminal and the vast majority of immigration violations are civil. And so there's different issues there based on what is the charge against the individual. Sometimes they're civil charges and not criminal.
Yeah, I just trying my general knowledge. Thank you.
I'm going to recognize Vice Chair Allen to provide some comments and context.
I can at least just share in the district what we're facing right now. So we have a law that we worked on a couple of years ago. We actually worked with law enforcement and immigration rights organizations and found a good balance where if there is a judicial warrant, then we will honor that warrant and there will be a hold. But absent a court order and a warrant, we don't do a hold. There's an effort in Congress right now, partly just because they can, to attack the district and try to overturn our local law. It's been in effect for 4 to 5 years. The number of complaints that we have had related to that law in effect is 0. So it has not been a problem. It's actually worked really well with law enforcement so that they can exercise when they have a judicial order and a warrant. But kind of to just the politics of the moment intersecting with our laws, it's a clear case right now.
Thank you very much. And that will conclude the question portion here. And I want to thank Mr. Chase for taking the time to come across the street.
Thank you.
This is very informative, and thank you for answering all the questions that we posed to you here today.
Thank you.
The 11th through the 14th is the NACO.
The 11th through the 14th is the NACO conference, for those who might not have heard.
Is DC invited?
Okay, so we'll now move to agenda item 11. If there's any other business, which we don't have, so let me move now to item number 12, which is our adjournment. But before I do that, let me thank everyone for participating in today's meeting. The board does not have a regular meeting in July or August. We are scheduled to be together at the COG Leadership Retreat in Cambridge, Maryland on July 25th and 26th. So I'm excited to say that most of the board has already registered in advance. So thank you so much for doing that. If you've not done so already, please make sure you connect with the COG staff and we can get you confirmed and have a spot. So with that, I will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you very much.